Look at that. Just
very proud of you.
Here we go. The camera also shines a light. I saw the funny expression I make when I'm shocked. I decided my clothes were frumpy, and I realized
what actually unfolds when the cameras turn off, but the truth just won't hide. When the whole Hollywood hype facade of the ideal family starts to crumble behind closed doors, when the silent strength, once viewed as such, transcends into quiet defeat, that's when the cracks in reality start to appear. This is the tale of a secret recording, a shattered illusion, and the gradual fall of a reality TV empire. The day that Sister Wives transcended a series, it became a war zone. And even when filming stopped, the microphones never really fell silent. Filming had been officially complete. The crew broke down, boom mics were stored, lights went dark, and production trucks started departing the cul-de-sac. Everyone assumed it was done. But something was forgotten, a little microphone still attached to Cody Brown's shirt, still active, still rolling. What that microphone caught was not intended to be public. Cody, worn out, fell onto the couch as if 20 years of weight had finally crushed him. His shirt was loose, untucked, his posture defeated. He rubbed at his temples and grumbled under his breath. This whole thing is disgusting. Robyn stood still in the room behind, arms folded tightly. She didn't yell. She didn't have to. "What did you just say?" she snapped. Cody didn't raise his head. He spoke flatly. "Living this way, the lies, the facade, you, me, all of it." The words spewed out like venom. Robyn rolled back visibly, like she'd been punched. "So, now this is my fault," she snapped, voice cold. Cody's tone remained flat, but the words landed hard. "You dictate everything. You cry, then you push, and I'm the one left to choke on it." This wasn't a yell. It was something more, a raw, cold truth told by someone too exhausted to keep pretending. And the mic captured it all, unfiltered and bare. Later that evening, Robyn, believing herself to be alone in her bedroom, opened up emotionally to a respected producer. Her on-camera charm had gone, her voice shaking now, cracked as she sobbed, "He actually called me." But she stifled herself. The melancholy was quickly overpowered by something more toxic. "Janelle's behaving like some West hero," she said scornfully. "And Meri, she's just drifting about like some tragic Victorian spectre." These were not the words of a woman letting go of anguish. They were deliberate and frosty. The Robyn once perceived by fans as soft and devoted was gone. In her wake was a person pacing her bedroom in outrage, raging about how she was the sole one keeping the family together. "They should thank me," she growled. "I held this whole circus together." There was then a laugh, low, mocking, and empty. It wasn't happiness, it was a facade, hiding something else that was uglier. That recording, which was merely marked Clip 14, Do Not Delete, ultimately made its way to the mailbox of a retired television editor. No note, no signature, just an unmarked envelope containing a flash drive. Intrigued, he played it. Within a matter of hours, he was amazed. By morning, the whole audio clip had been shared online. Reddit erupted. The fan theories and rumors weren't just hearsay anymore. They had been supported by actual voices, actual words, actual feeling. No one was speculating now. They were listening to Robyn rip the very women she once referred to as her sisters. No more pretenses, no more performances. The truth was out. And now that it was, it couldn't be retracted. Janelle didn't have to listen to the whole recording to know what it was about. She had already experienced it. But the sound of Robyn calling her a martyr, portraying her difficulties as some form of burden instead of something real, hit a nerve. Robyn always saved those biting comments for when she thought no one was around to hear them. Standing by herself in her kitchen, her hands shaking ever so slightly, Janelle pressed play again. And this time, she laughed, not because anything of it was funny, but because it was liberating. Years of silent, nagging doubts suddenly felt like validation. She had witnessed the transition occur, Cody losing his hold, Robyn moving in and slowly moving the others aside. The truth finally had a voice, and it was one that was heard louder than ever. The cameras may have finished filming, but something greater had begun. Fate, it appeared, wasn't done with this tale. Now the whole world could witness what actually happened behind closed doors when the lights went out and the makeup faces were gone. This wasn't a typical episode. It was the collapse of a well-crafted reality, frozen by the very technology intended to preserve the facade. What do you believe? Was it destiny, sabotage, or just the truth refusing to remain buried? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to Sister Wives Files, and hit the bell icon, because this tale is far from done, not by a long shot. The collapse was inevitable at some point, but this was never really about romance or heartbreak. It was always about power, and this was the time that fantasy ended. Not even Robyn, Cody's purported favourite, was exempt from his repulsion. A phone call came in over state lines. No hello. Just one big question. Janelle didn't need to ask what it was. For the first time in years, they were on the same page. They'd both given up, sometimes silently, sometimes publicly, but always with the hope that the family was salvageable, that their efforts were for something. But the charade was over. No more pretending to be, no more silent obedience, no more letting Robyn manipulate from behind the scenes. The performance was ended, and beneath it, the truth was clear to behold. Robyn was never really one of them. She had only acted long enough to seize her domination. In Parawan, Meri gazed at a printed transcript as if it were a gravestone. Robyn's words were not merely cruel, they were final. Meri had held on to the thought for years that if she stayed faithful, if she waited patiently, she'd be revealed again. But to be cast aside as a tragic Victorian ghost, that was not merely insulting, it was erasure. And in that instant, something within herself shattered. Not with rage, but with swift, agonizing clarity. She didn't require a family that erased her behind closed doors. What she required was to go through those doors and shut them behind her for all eternity. Nobody thought the fallout would go public, but when it did, it landed on the internet like a bomb. The audio, raw and unedited, was posted by someone who wished to remain anonymous, and it did more damage than any TLC teaser ever did. Reddit was ablaze with reaction threads. Instagram Reels cycled Cody's voice declaring Robyn was ick, layering slow-motion footage of her sobbing on camera. The facade of scripted TV was blown. What remained was something closer to the truth and a lot more violent. This time, the audience wasn't merely observing, they were piecing together connections, posting timestamps, inundating comments with indignation. The veil had dropped, and no PR announcement could raise it again. Within TLC headquarters, alarm spread. Attorneys rushed to monitor possible breaches of contract and NDA violations. But the producers, they sent something else altogether, ratings gold. Now this is the tale. Off the record, one of the old editors finally confessed it was him. Using a burner handle, he was the person who leaked the clip, not in revenge, but in fatigue. Years of bottling up too many truths had finally gotten to him. What he unleashed wasn't just audio, it was accountability. Back in Flagstaff, Janelle's family group chat came alive. Her children flooded her with a cascade of texts, video links, screenshots. Even the younger kids, normally held at arm's length from the drama, were following it live. Gabe, never one for words, had but 4. He really said it. It wasn't incredulity, it was confirmation. All those years of being ignored, downplayed, brushed off, now they had proof. Janelle sat in her living room, phone clutched in her hand, listening to the clip. She didn't break, she didn't cry. She felt peaceful, not because the storm had rolled over, but because the truth had finally surfaced, where it always should belong. Over there, Meri read the transcript repeatedly, every line falling like a weight on her chest. She had already endured Cody's silence, his indifference, the utter absence of love. But to hear Robyn, the sister wife she had once embraced with open arms, reduce her to some wretched Victorian ghost, that wasn't merely cruel, that was deliberate. This betrayal wasn't from Cody, it was from Robyn, cold, condescending. drenched in condescension and self-righteousness. And somehow that hurt even more. With Cody, Meri had come to terms with the abandonment a long time ago. But with Robyn, there'd always been hope. Hope for sisterhood, for respect, for something real. But instead, she spent years on the outside of a family that no longer made room for her. Her love had been returned with obligation. Her loyalty was met with silence. And still, she stayed, out of habit, fear, faith. But now, the truth was clear. Robyn hadn't just endured Meri's silence, and Meri? She had finally stopped playing. Her fingers floated above her keyboard on her laptop, then crept hesitantly into writing. No editors, no producers, just her voice, shaky but unyielding. "I'm not a ghost," she typed softly but firmly. "And I'm not desperate. I was loyal. I was lied to, and I stayed too long." She hesitated, gaze wandering past the screen into the realm where trust had existed. In that instant, Meri chose herself, no longer the wife, the shadow figure, the afterthought, just Meri, and she wasn't going to shut up about it. "You attempted to erase me," she whispered, "but I'm still here. I still exist." In one breath, Meri took back something she hadn't possessed in years, herself. And if Robyn believed that only Cody's admission had been taped, she was wrong. What she recorded made a ripple effect that extended far beyond a single moment. It reverberated in every hushed hallway of the family, opening up all the silence that long had shrouded their secrets. Janelle stood in her own kitchen, phone gripped in her hand. It shook a little as she pressed play once more. The recording didn't startle her, it was just louder than what she'd already experienced, a nightmare-given sound. But to hear Robyn so venomous, that hit differently. The self-satisfied tone, the condescending words, martyr complex, so independent, accompanied by a derogatory jab that Cody wouldn't even text her back. Janelle didn't blink. She gave a harsh, bitter laugh. Not because she was amused, but because she was relieved. For now, finally, the lies had been brought into the daylight. She had been the reliable one, the unobtrusive anchor, for years. Janelle had always been the sane one, the reliable wife who kept things from falling apart as chaos erupted around her. She didn't seek attention, never played the victim, and never provoked controversy. She just kept the fragile family foundation from collapsing, all while Robyn seeped in and positioned herself as queen, tearfully sobbing on camera, scheming off camera, and slowly becoming Cody's emotional North Star. The rest of them shoved to the side, piece by piece. But the performance was finished now. The curtain was down, the illusion broken. Christine's voice came on the line, tight and guarded. "Did you hear it?" Janelle breathed softly. "I heard every word." They didn't have to tell her anything more. The whole playbook, the manipulation, the pseudo-sisterhood, the sneaky power maneuvers, had all fallen apart under the pressure of Robyn's own words. But Janelle wasn't shattered. She felt liberated. It was as if someone had finally severed the final strand binding her to a lie she didn't have to hold on to anymore. "It was never about love," she whispered. "It was always about control." And now, even Cody could not abide the woman he once placed on a pedestal. For the first time in years, Janelle was not attempting to interpret Cody's moods or consider whether or not he even recalled she was alive. She was standing outside the ruins now, observing the tower fall without being trapped under it. And that changed everything. Because once you refuse to excuse mistreatment, you refuse to remain a supporting character in someone else's story, you begin writing your own. In that moment, Janelle picked up the pen. Back in Parawan, Meri stood at the window of her peaceful B&B, a crumpled transcript sitting next to a half-drained teacup. The words on the page weighed more heavily than anything Cody had ever told her directly. Tragic Victorian ghost. It wasn't a mean phrase, it was an erasure. Meri had heard hurtful things before, from Cody, from internet critics, even from her own mind late at night when she lay awake. But hearing that word from Robyn, the one she had stood up for, trusted, defended, hurt differently. her breath caught, not with sadness, but with something more profound, a slow, quiet rage. She'd been shoved to the side, utilized when it was easy, endured when required, but never really noticed. And yet, she arrived, she smiled, she remained kind, she even managed to fool herself that Robyn did care, that Robyn regarded her as a sister. She knew better now. She was never a sister, only a replacement, someone to occupy space until Robyn no longer required her. This time, when Meri opened her laptop, it wasn't for a business update or a filtered farewell post, it was personal, raw, hers. "I'm not a ghost," she typed, her voice calm, unwavering, "and I'm done pretending." No drama, no tears, no grand exit, just the truth, and that was more than enough. Because the deepest pain wasn't from what Robyn had said, it was from the hope that loyalty would matter, that after all those years of showing up, of hanging in, it would mean something in the end. That dream was over. And in its wake, not bitterness, not revenge, just determination. Meri wasn't going to recede into the background anymore, not this time. And Janelle? Her boots strike the pavement with methodical intent. No script, no spotlight, no crew in tow, just her. One crumpled transcript in her pocket and a quiet flame in her eyes. She wasn't going into war, she was going into truth. Because although Robyn had jeered at her for having a martyr complex, what Robyn never realized was this: martyrs don't break, they rise. After all that Janelle had endured, raising children in emotional solitude, living with the burden of unfulfilled commitments, Janelle had suffered it all, years of emotional abandonment, loyal to a family that always put her last, and now the woman who gained the most from her silence would have the nerve to taunt her. That was the last straw. The door opened with a creak. Robyn was there, arms across her chest, eyes red but unseeing. Janelle didn't see grief. She saw pity for herself, and she had seen pity for years to come. Without so much as a hesitation, she entered. Meri entered behind, quiet, steady, even. Nobody said anything until they sat down at the old wooden table, the same one that had once seen holiday meals and unspoken drama. But today it was not about tradition, it was where a reckoning took place. Janelle's voice finally interrupted the silence, quiet, cold and firm. "You don't get to cry and be the victim and make fun of the women who have built this family." Robyn winced. Meri spoke next, her voice a little shaky but unwavering. "You called me desperate, thought I'd never hear it. Say it now, to my face." Robyn stammered. The polished delivery was gone. There was no script to fall back on. What followed wasn't a confrontation, it was a reckoning. Janelle did not yell. She did not have to. Her calm cut sharper than any shout. She put it all on the table, the years of being held back, the sacrifices that were never thanked, the losses swallowed in the interest of harmony. Robyn attempted to reply, but it was apparent she was not sorry, just trapped. And this time, nobody came to bail her out. This was no longer reality television. This was reality. Outside, the breeze was chillier than anticipated. Meri wrapped her shawl tighter around her. Janelle took a deep breath. A breath she hadn't even known she was holding. There were no apologies, no hugs, no insincere prattle about making up. But something had changed, something genuine, a release, a reclaiming. For the first time in years, they weren't contorting themselves to get Cody's approval. They weren't acting. They weren't conforming to a shape that was never meant to contain them. They were telling truths, finally. Within, Robyn leaned forward over the table. Her tears flowed, not to manipulate or negotiate, but in shock. She was by herself now, by herself with her own words, words she never imagined that anyone else would hear. Words that once held power now bound around her like shackles. There was no retort, not this time. Cody had heard it all, the taunts, the cruelty, the manner Robyn discussed the women he once referred to as his spiritual peers. And worse? He didn't stand up for her. Not now. Not anymore. Far, far away from this scene, Cody replayed the tape. He uttered no words, no rage, no regrets, only a slow downward realization. The empire he constructed on emotional capital and calculated silence disintegrated from the inside. The women weren't walking away from him, they were walking away from the whole story. They weren't waiting to be scripted back in, they were writing their own tales now. He hadn't lost a marriage or a television show, he'd lost control. Janelle and Meri sped away without turning back. Their resilience had been there all along, hidden behind good manners and buried pain. Now, among the ashes of all that had deceived them, they stood taller. Not because they were whole again, but because they were no longer dishonest. They were no longer wives. They were witnesses, survivors. And they weren't fighting for a seat at the table anymore. They were turning the table over. Here is Janelle, they witnesses. The fires didn't blow. Their arrival was quiet. Such silence. It was almost strange. For Robyn, the first time in years, she could hear the reverberation of her own breath in a home previously filled with steps, voices, and laughter. That had always been the game. Robyn had spun herself into the center of a family held together with borrowed feelings and stage-studied affection for years. But even the best-crafted world will finally come apart when its gravity is lost. And Cody's silence, that was the gravity, and it was lost. He hadn't gone away, he was still there. But something had snapped. The pedestal she had once occupied had cracked under her. She could still remember his words, "My defense of you is done." Not anger, not abandonment, something colder, detachment. The man who had once reordered an entire family configuration in order to make her content couldn't even look at her now, and that scared her more than ever the other wives had. At the same time in Parawan, Meri made it back to her peaceful little B&B. Not in victory, not even in peace, just changed. She made herself a pot of tea and left it until it was cold, but for the first time she didn't sit around waiting for someone else to share it with. She drank it by herself, and that was enough. Janelle came home to a different kind of quiet. Not empty, not bitter, just hers. A silence filled with self-possession, the kind that comes when you've owned your decisions and no longer feel the need to explain them. Her kids sent memes and inside jokes. She laughed out loud, really laughed. It was simple, but it was real, and that made it powerful. Online, the released clip continued spreading on Reddit, Instagram, YouTube. But for the women who had endured it, going viral was never the intention, because the power wasn't in what was uncovered. It was in what followed. They didn't simply lay bare Robyn's real face. They took back their own. Cody didn't simply lose command. He finally understood what clinging had really meant.